A very good afternoon to all of you, respected resource person, ma'am, and all the learned participants. We are happy to inform you that today in this session, Professor Alpana Borgohain, Madam, is with us. Before ma'am's presentation, I would like to request Dr. Joyashree Nath, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, Morigaon College, and member of this our organizing committee, to initiate the session and introduce our resource person, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, respected resource person and participants. I, Joyashree Nath, on behalf of Center of Ethnic Studies and Research, Guwahati, in collaboration with Morigaon College, Morigaon, and Moridhol College, Dhemaji, would like to invite you all in today's session, second session, and session number 18. Today is the last day of our 1 week long workshop on human rights, education issues and challenges in Northeast India. For this technical session, we invited respected resource person, Dr. Alpana Borgohain, ma'am, to enlighten us on the topic of the third gender as a human being, a worker and a citizen. Before I hand over the session, I would like to introduce Dr. Alpana Borgohain, ma'am, with the participants. Dr. Alpana Borgohain, ma'am, is presently working as a professor in the Department of Women's Studies, Guwahati University. She started her career way back in 1994 as a teacher of political science, Gorgaon College. Later, she joined the Department of Political Science, Dibrugarh University as an assistant professor in 1996. She was a professor and served as head Department of Political Science, Dibrugarh University before joining the Department of Women's Studies, Guwahati University. She served as HOD of the department from 2017 to 2020. Her area of interest includes political theory, feminist theory, and gender studies. The title of Dr. Alpana Borgohain's doctoral research thesis was on an analysis of certain perspective of feminist critique of liberalism. In addition, she has published a number of research articles in national and international journals and books. Now, I request ma'am to deliver her lecture on the topic. Ma'am? Hello, ma'am?
Yes.
Hi.
Thank you so much, Joyashree, for the introduction. And at the very outset, I would like to thank the Center for Ethnic Studies and Research, Guwahati, Department of Political Science, Morigaon College, and Department of Political Science, Moridhol College, for giving me this opportunity to be here in the midst of my learned participants. And at the very outset, I would like to thank the organizing secretary and the entire organizing team for giving me this opportunity to be here, and especially to Dr. Dipen Das, who has been my student in the Department of Political Science, Dibrugarh University. So I'll be speaking on the topic, human rights. I'll be speaking on the topic, the third gender, as a human being, as a worker, and as a citizen. Before I start with my topic, I would, like to talk about my location and positionality. I am a woman, and that too a married woman. I am a heterosexual, a teacher, and since I belong to the Department of Women's Studies, and that is my bread and butter, I teach and do women's studies and feminism. And therefore, I would like to identify myself as a feminist. And, feminism is not merely about academics. It is also about activism. So I engage in activism in many different ways and believe in a transformational politics to create a future society based on liberty, equality, justice, and creativity, where every human being, irrespective of the sexual orientation or gender identity, is assured of their respect, dignity, and essence. Before we start with the topic, it is essential for us to understand the concept of gender. And if you to the concept of gender, this was brought into circulation in academics in the 1970s by the second wave of feminism and the radical feminist school of thought. And since then, it has been used as a conceptual and analytical category to understand the society. And this concept of gender, when initially it emerged in opposition to the concept of sex, where sex was considered as biological and natural, and gender is considered as a construct. It can be a social construct, it can be a cultural construct. But when we consider it to be a construct, we need to understand that gender can also be reconstructed. And the feminists, when they refer to the sex-gender, distinction, they happen to put a lot of, priority on the fact that biological determinism brings about a patriarchal system in the society, where a particular gender is assigned with definite roles, responsibilities, and is given subordinate status. I can hear some sound in Rupjyoti Das's. So to create a consciousness, and in this way, the patriarchal system creates a consciousness that that the women, right, are better suited to the roles assigned by the society, right? And therein lies their happiness. But then, when we refer to feminism, we will find that we can go through the French feminist Simone de Beauvoir and her work, The Second Sex, which was published in 1949. And here, she refers to the fact that, the male, that is the men, are the superior sex. And therefore, they are considered as the first gender. Because when we refer to the norm of a human being, she is of the view that we refer to the male body and to the gender identity called men. Then she goes on to tell us that the second category is the female body, and femininity is assigned to her, and she is the woman as a gender identity. She then goes on to tell us that there is also a third category of people, the eunuchs, and they enjoy the subordinate roles, responsibilities, and subordinate status in the society. In this way, what she creates is a hierarchy between the first gender, the second gender, and the third gender. Today, this lecture will be primarily on the third gender. In common usage, very frequently there is this gender slippage. Previously, in the admission forms in the educational institutions, what we had is the category called sex. What were the responses that we got? We got the response of male and female. But then today, that particular category has been replaced with another word, and that is gender. What is the responses we still get? We get the same responses, male and female. Is it correct? Because when we refer to gender identity, we refer to, the social and cultural constructions. And as genders, we are, it is not about our bodies as such. It is not about our biology, but it is about our identities. And therefore, in that column, the correct response should be, men, women, the third gender, or others. Okay. Even though feminism tried to differentiate between sex and gender, and tried to say, especially the radical feminists tried to say that there is no relation between the two. But as a society, we have always related the two terms. Because the moment an infant is born, what do? We identify the body of that particular infant, and based on the organs that are visible, we assign the gender identity. And from that day onwards, we start the socialization process. Okay, so if it is a male child, we start the socialization as a boy who will grow into a man. If it is a female child, what we do is we start the socialization into femininity and women, right? And we ensure that she grows into an ideal woman. But what happens if the infant is neither male nor female? Do we have a gender identity for it, into which that particular child will be socialized and brought up? This kind of intersex people do not have a prescribed gender identity. And very frequently you will find such people, when they grow up, they realize that the self within them actually doesn't belong to the body in which they are. In other words, the body might seem to be that of a male, the physiology of it, the external appearance of it. But the self within is a self which is feminine, right? And the self feels that it is trapped in a wrong body. So what happens to the human right of such a person? In feminism, for instance, later on it becomes gender studies, right? You will find there are different theorists, right? Especially, theorists like Judith Butler. And Judith Butler will tell you that, your body might be that of a male, right? But it doesn't mean that you will be a man. You can also identify yourself as a woman or somebody else, right? So she puts a lot of emphasis on the self-identification of the genders. We should leave it to the person concerned to identify herself or himself, or the person concerned with regard to the person's identity, right? And Judith Butler also says that every individual, through subversive politics, can engage in performance of the gender roles, because the gender roles is about performance, right? So you can re-perform through critical engagement, through self-reflection, and claim for yourself a different gender identity. So leave it to the individual to identify themselves, to identify their own gender. And for this, we can definitely refer to the path-breaking work of Judith Butler which was published in 1990, and it is called The Gender Trouble. And I think many of you have read it. She is also a postmodern theorist, and she has been influenced by Michel Foucault. So it is these ideas of the postmodern theorist, and especially the ideas of Judith Butler, that have brought into feminism its third wave, right? And it gave rise to many queer theorists. You know, the term queer was used to signify, people who did not conform to heteronormativity or heterosexuality, right? But these different groups of people with different and varied sexual orientations. I'm here referring to the LGBTQIA+, right? What they did was they have used the term queer itself as an umbrella term, and they have tried to normalize it. So if you are interested in understanding, gender as a conceptual tool of analysis in the course of your study and research, definitely you can refer to Key Concepts in Gender Studies, written by Pilcher. Then there is another work by Anne Oakley on sex, gender, and society. These are basic books that you can read. And today with the internet, right, on the push of a button, right, you have got so many resources to go through. Now today, basically, in this particular talk, I will be referring to the third gender. And in this particular case, the, hijras of India. And herein, I would like to share my own personal experience. When I was there in the Department of Political Science, Dibrugarh University, a research scholar there came to me with this particular topic, that she is interested and keen to carry out a PhD research work on the Hijras of Assam. At that point of time, it was very difficult to get the proposal passed through the entire research procedure. She came to me around 2011-12, and it was only in 2013 that the scholar was able to get herself registered. Today, she has been awarded with the PhD degree. Why am I referring to this particular experience? Because even in the world of academics and research, whenever you come up with new topics, there'll be a lot of resistance, but then you will have to stand your ground. You will need a lot of hard work and patience, because at that point of time, the proposal was sent back to us on the basis that, this category of people does not exist in the state of Assam, and that they are a floating population and they come from outside. So everybody thinks that in their society, in their own society, they do not have this category of people. So, in this process, what do? We try to invisibilize this vulnerable category of people on the margins. So what we did was we carried out a pilot survey, and at that point of time, I was the HOD in the Department of Political Science there, and I got this opportunity to be a member of the Research Council. It is only when I went as the supervisor to defend the proposal that the proposal was ultimately passed. So this kind of hierarchy, this kind of marginalization and invisibilization of a category of people who are human beings like us, right, should not exist. This is nothing but discrimination, okay? So we always need to consider our societies as consisting of sexes and genders beyond the binaries. We are not just male and female or man and women, but there are so many other categories of sexes and genders. And we are all entitled to live a human existence with our due share of rights, respect, dignity, and, justice, okay? So when we refer to the societies throughout history in India as being beyond the binaries, right? We can refer here to Vedic literature, where in the Vedic literature, there is reference also to a Tritiya Prakriti, right? Who is a castrated male, who is not a castrated male, but who is biologically born as an intersex. Then, if you refer to, the Kama Sutra or Mahabharata, you will also find instances of homosexuality and transgender. Similarly, in Buddhism, in their particular text called Vinaya, there is reference to Ubhata Vyanjanaka, which means bisexuals. Then Pondaka, people of various non-normative sexualities, right? Then you can also refer to the Jain scriptures, right? And you can go on to prove that society all throughout human existence has been beyond the binaries. Whenever we refer to the hijras, there is always this practice of castration or emasculation, okay? But then this particular practice did not exist in India in the ancient Vedic period when they enjoyed some status and dignity. But then it came into existence in the Middle Ages with the Islamic tradition. And, they were referred to as, there was a word which is Khwaza Sara, right? And these, these castrated males, they were given certain occupations and professions, such as they belonged to the royal household and they attended to the decoration of the royal master, right? Similarly, they were also used as informers or spies. And at that point of time, we are referring to the Middle Ages, 11th and 12th century. They did not do the kind of dancing performances that they do today, because they were engaged in courts, they were engaged in royal households. Then they were also engaged as security guards for the royal women in the harem. It was, in other words, during the 11th and the 12th century that the practice of castration came into existence. But at that point of time, they had the occupation, right? But the practice of castration was institutionalized because of the Islamic influence. Now, when you refer to this word hijra, right, which is referred to the Indian eunuch, it is a word which is a combination of the Persian, the Arabic, and the Hindu. And it was used in the Mughal bazaars. But then there are others who are of the view that it is a word of Urdu origin, right? And the main criteria, according to a scholar on the third genders of India, that is Wendy O. Flaherty, right? She says that impotency is the main criteria of this particular group of people. Now, with the advent of British India, right, the British colonizers brought in new legislations, and they brought in a very repressive and draconian legislation called the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. And this particular Criminal Tribes Act 1871 criminalized many tribes of India. Around 30 plus tribes of India were categorized and notified as criminals. The Hijras too were categorized as criminals by the British. And, even though they were not into this particular profession or vocation as criminals, they were, listed as a criminal tribe. This affected their status. This affected their, position in the society. And many of the members of this Hijra community, they had to go underground during the British colonial regime in India. Moreover, another, amendment act was brought about to the 1871 Act, and that is called an Act for the Registration of Criminal Tribes and Eunuchs, 1897. Now, this particular act created a register where the names of the eunuchs were registered, along with their residences or address and the property that they had. Moreover, in the Criminal Tribes Act itself of 1871, there was a section, and I think you all know about that particular section, the section of 377, right, IPC. And under this law, the local government, and under this section 377 of IPC, it was stated that the target was the sexuality of the Hijras, the eunuchs, right? So it says, whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, women, or animal shall be punished with imprisonment for life or with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 10 years and shall also be liable to fine, right? So apart from, peno-vaginal penetration, right, which leads to reproduction, all the other forms of sex was considered as unnatural and as a criminal offense. Okay, even when that particular anal sex or oral sex or whatever be the nature of it was done on the basis of consensus, it was considered as an offense by the British law in India. So in this particular kind of repressive legislation that was brought about, what happened to the Hijra community, right? They were pushed into the darkest corners of the society. And there is all probability that they must have taken shelter in the Baijis, kothas, or the brothels for their own protection and security. Moreover, they were without any kind of livelihood or occupation. So what else can they do but to sell their bodies? Of course, there is no historical evidence or record, right, to prove this. However, their sudden disappearance during the British regime from the society, right, makes us think in that direction. And many of the writers and researchers on the third gender assume that this must have happened to the Hijra community during the British colonial regime. So in other words, it was these criminal laws or the draconian laws brought about by the British that drastically changed the lives of the third gender, right? To feared strangers, to sex workers, and to beggars. And they have lost their earlier position and status in the society. Now, you know, what happened during the British rule is that the Indian nationalists, they organized amongst themselves, they carried out a mobilization for the freedom of India. And in this Indian national movement for independence, this community of people too participated with a lot of dreams and aspirations, always believing that independent India will give them their lost status and their rights to live a dignified life in the society. But when the Constitution of India was brought into existence in 1950, what it guaranteed was rights of the people of India as the citizens of India. And Article 15, as you know, prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. And Article 16 guarantees equal employment opportunities irrespective of sex. So these rights, in a way, could also have been applied to the third gender. But then the Constitution of India was interpreted by the Indian state and the Indian society, right? Especially the term sex was interpreted as in terms of binaries, as male and female. And those who were intersex, right, they were neither male nor female, right? So their dream of becoming equal citizens in an independent India was lost, because the government of India prescribed to this kind of a binary division of sex. Then, if you look upon the census of India, also, you will find that in independent India, right, the census of India all throughout, when it refers to the sexes of the population, there again, they are taking up the binaries, male and female. So where have they included the third gender people? They must have, included them in the male category. Even though they dress up like a woman, right? And they are very, very feminine, they must have been included in the male category if ever they have been included. It was only in 2011 census of India. And when we refer to 2011, it means nearly 64 years after independence that they came to be included in the 2011 census of India. So, we as a nation have lost a huge database regarding the third gender population. because of this kind of enumeration of the sexes in the census of India. You know, we need to understand that the third gender people are like us. They are also human beings. They are also entitled to human rights. So, in the society, what kind of social status do they acquire as humans, right? You will find that in the Indian social system, where we have the caste system, and you know that the caste system gives every individual caste certain roles and status. And it also tells us how to relate with other caste, whom to marry, whom not to marry, right? With whom to dine with, from which well you can collect water for your drinking purposes, and so on and so forth, right? But then this particular caste system did not include the third gender, right? On the other hand, you can consider the third gender as an outcast, like any untouchable, because they are not able to live in the family where they are born. They are not able to live in the society where they were born. Why? Because there is a lot of, a lot of humiliation has been heaped on them. And they go through a lot of, emotional and psychological trauma, as a result of which they flee their homes, they flee their societies, right? And in this way, you will find that the Hijra community is a distinct category. You can call them a pseudo class, but not a caste. But there is also a positive side in their composition, because they have been able to break down the caste divides. And the members of their community come from, many different castes, right? They have been pulled out deliberately out of their own caste, the caste in which they were born, and they have come together and have been incorporated as members of a single unit. Okay? Then, in the society, the Hijras at times are regarded as auspicious, at other times they are regarded as inauspicious. So this kind of a contradiction exists, right? And therefore, whenever in societies where they are regarded as inauspicious, they are excluded from rituals. And it is believed that they should not be touched by a new bride, because the impotency of the Hijra is contagious, and that bride might become infertile. On the other hand, they are also regarded as auspicious, because there is this particular belief that they are Mangala Mukhis, right? And, whenever they engage in begging as a profession, right? People usually give them liberally, because they are scared, as well as they have this belief that the Hijra has the power to either bless them or curse them, right? And therefore, very frequently, they are also invited to attend, all birth, marriage, and religious ceremonies, as their presence is regarded as a symbol of good luck. We have this practice known as the Badhai, right? And that is the only social role, the role of having the power to bless, right? So here in this Badhai system, this particular cultural practice, they get some money, right? Then, this Hijra community, they have also been able to create their own, distinct culture, right? And you will find that they have their own religion, they have their own godheads, then they have their own rituals. They also have, a distinct language, a secret language amongst them. Then you have their, this particular community has a distinct cultural, distinctiveness. And their social life or the community life is very well organized. They have distinct rules and principles. The Hijras in India are organized into 7 gharanas. And they have a particular hierarchy amongst them. At the top, you have the Nayaks, who are the leaders, then followed by the Gurus, who are the teachers, followed by the Chelas, right, who are the disciples. And then again, you have the sub-Chelas, right? They also have a recruitment process because the membership of this particular community has to continue. And therefore, they also have a recruitment process. Moreover, when the Nayaks grow old, who will look after them, right? And therefore, they have created this particular system. They also have a Hijra Panchayat, very much like the village panchayats or the Khap panchayats that we otherwise have, right? And therein they will take decisions relating to any kind of violation of the rules and practices. And a member of that particular community can also be banned from living in that community. Then, if you refer to the Hijra as workers, I've already referred to few of the professions that they had during the Vedic period, during the Islamic period, and during the pre-colonial period, right? They were considered as reliable servants in the royal households. They were used as domestic servants or domestic work. They were made to do domestic work. And they were also assigned as security guards of the women, royal women in the harems. And there was also a huge demand for, Hijra as slaves. And therefore what existed was the Hijra trade existed. The eunuch trade existed. And castration was institutionalized. Okay. And even in the West, you will find that many of the Hijras or intersex people, right, they also had a very distinct voice. Even in India, they do have a very distinct voice. But why am I referring to the West? Because there you will find, they were very good opera singers. So many of them took on to singing. In India also, they took on to dancing, singing, acting, right? And then they were also the very good barbers, hairstylists, masseuras, and sex workers. During the British rule, in many parts of India and amongst many communities, what they did was they would, make a few of their sons. They would castrate them and convert them into eunuchs and give it to the tax collector, the governor, in exchange for revenue, right? So in this way, there was a huge demand for, castrated males as slaves. Then what happened was, during the colonial period, when the royalty went through financial crunch, many of these eunuchs who enjoyed some kind of profession and occupation, they went and joined the Hijras, okay? And some of them took onto the streets, performed as clowns. And they started losing all the benefits that they got from the Indian royalty prior to the British. Because even during the early colonial period, they used to get benefits from the royalty, right? They used to get things like land, rights of food, and smaller amounts of money from agricultural households in certain specific areas of India. But with the Act of 1871, the Criminal Tribes Act, they lost everything, right? They lost their professions, they lost their livelihoods, they went underground. Now, in contemporary India, you will find that many of the Hijras migrate to Western and Northern Indian states, because it is here that, the practice of Badhai exists. And many of the Hijras or intersex people, the third gender from the smaller towns, they move to the large metropolis, right? In search of their own identity and to escape from the torture and humiliation that they face back at home and in their families. Moreover, they have been, expelled from the property rights and their family entitlements. Moreover, they are school dropouts. They do not fit into the competitive job market. So the only option left for them is to join the Hijra community for their own security and livelihood. They have been deprived from formal education, right? And they lack qualification and skill, and therefore they are unemployed. And you will find that even though they are able to get education and qualifications, very frequently their sexual orientation is used as a ground to discriminate against them, right? Because the social mindset against the third gender has not changed. So in India, there have been certain legislative, progressive legislations for the human rights of the third gender. And on 15th April 2015, the Supreme Court of India gave the verdict to give the option for the third gender category in all admission forms of all educational institutions. Moreover, you will find the Supreme Court of India has also said that, the social security schemes for the welfare of the third gender community must be brought about by the government, right? Both at the central level as well as the state levels. And there are also instances where, people of this particular community face a lot of problem with regard to gender ambiguity, because very frequently, even for applications in jobs, you must be either male or female, men and women. You cannot be a third gender. This was not recognized. Even in the sports arena, that is in the International Olympics also, there was this gender test or sex test being done, because you have games only for women and men, right? However, these, testing is now gradually being relaxed. And in the Sydney Olympics of 2000, the International Olympic Committee abolished the universal sex testing. Then, however, there are, many different state governments in India who are taking up, welfare measures for the third gender category, right? We can mention a few states who have been ahead in this kind of welfare measures for the transgender people, such as the Tamil Nadu government, the Karnataka government, Andhra Pradesh government, and the Bihar government. Okay, and even in the state of Assam, very recently, a welfare board has been formed for the third gender people. Then we can also refer to as a citizen and their political status, right? You can refer here to all the human rights declarations at the international level, the UDHR of 1948, which has the concept of equality and prohibits discrimination. Similarly, the 1966 Covenant, the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, therein there are articles such as the Article 6, which guarantees right to be recognized as a person before the law. Because, every person, to get the status of a human being, must be recognized in the law as a legal entity. Only then you will be entitled to your human rights. Then at the international level, because it has been recognized that there has been a lot of, abuse, discrimination against the third gender people. And therefore, in November 2006, the Yoga Carta Principles, which consist of 29 principles, were brought about. And that was in 2006, right? Which says that every individual should be entitled to their gender identity. And if they choose to bring about any kind of surgery of their different body parts, they must be allowed. These Yoga Carta principles in 2017 were again extended and can right? So there have been legal changes at the international level, at the same time at the national level. And when you refer to I've already referred to the Census of India. Similarly, when you refer to the third gender as citizens and their right to vote, you will find that it was only after a long struggle, they were given the voting rights in India, that too by the Supreme Court in 1986. And they were included in the electoral rolls during the tenure of TN session. And
ma'am, sorry for interruption. Ma'am, sorry for interruption.
Yes, yes.
Meghali Prasad ji, madam, please switch off your mic. No, ma'am. Meghali Prasad ji, madam, please switch off your mic. It gets problem for us. Meghali Prasad ji, madam, please switch off your mic. Meghali Prasad ji, madam, please switch off. Please switch off your mic. Meghali Prasad ji, madam, please switch off. Kindly switch off your mic. Yeah, ma'am, sorry. Please, you can continue.
It's okay. So it was only after a long struggle, they were able to get their voting rights, and that too, it was given to them by the Supreme Court in India in 1986. And they were included in the electoral rolls as voters during the tenure of TN session. But then they were given the choice whether they wanted to be identified as male or female. But then it was only in 2009 that the Election Commission allowed the third gender to choose their own gender identity, the way they wanted to identify themselves. That was granted only in 2009. And don't forget that before that, in 2006, at the international level, we have the Yoga Carta principles. So the international legal developments definitely help to bring about changes in the national laws. There are many representatives from the third gender community who have contested as candidates in the elections in India, and especially at the local level and at the state assembly levels. And especially if you refer to the state of Madhya Pradesh, you will find many, candidates who have contested, especially in the municipal and local board elections, as independent candidates, because they are not, given membership into the established national body, political parties, and there is a lot of discrimination against them. But then, as independent candidates, they have been chosen by the mandate, and they have been elected, and they are doing good work. And the voters in general tend to have a lot of faith in them, primarily because they know that they do not have a family, and therefore the corruption under them will be far less. And maybe because they also have certain beliefs, cultural beliefs, and that might also be a reason. And therefore, in many of the municipal board elections and local board elections, especially in the state of Madhya Pradesh, you will find many members of this particular community being elected. The third gender is also getting very politically aware and conscious, and they have also been able to form their own organizations for the protection of their rights. They are also getting actively engaged, and they are carrying out a movement right from the grassroots level to the national level. And therefore, they have been successful to a large extent. And we can say that it is because of this kind of mobilization and activism amongst the third gender community that recently the Section 377 has been scrapped. And the entire legal journey and the legal struggle that went around Section 377. Ultimately, in 2018, it was scrapped, because once it was decriminalized by the Delhi High Court, then again it was legalized by the Supreme Court. Then there was a huge mass protest all over India, and finally it was scrapped in 2018, right? So whenever there is a consensual sex, whatever be the nature, it should be respected. After all, we are all entitled to our right to privacy. Okay, this in brief is my presentation, right? So with this, I thank Dipen Das for giving me this opportunity to share my views on the topic. Thank you, Dipen.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.
You have presented and included many aspects of third gender. First, conceptual development of third gender since 1970s. The second wave of feminism and radical feminist movement. The contribution of philosophers come activists to understand and conceptual development and distinction of sex and gender, identification of gender and socialization of gender. Second point, I have included in my summary, in the context of India, the Hijras or queer or LGBT community identified as third gender, and the historical significance and role Hijras played during ancient period, the Islamic period, and the changing of their life during colonial period because of criminalization of hijras and through many laws. Next point, post-independent period, Indian Constitution only include in the term, in Constitution only include the term sex, which society and state interpret citizens only as female and male, and a binary division of sex. In census also, they were included only in 2011. Then in present context, the hijras are forced to search for their own company for security and livelihood for themselves, although the traditional practices continue. And there is a huge gap in jobs, in sports and other areas that provide them a status and livelihood. And there are a lot of violations of their rights. However, there are laws has been made to recognize the rights of this community in both international and national level. Indian Constitution, including voting rights, inclusion in electoral laws as voters, and political participation, including representative. So now I would like to open the session for conversation or discussion on this topic. So participants, please ask, you can ask your questions or queries regarding the topic. Anyone, please? You can ask ma'am directly or you can write in your chat box.
Pallavi, Joyashree.
Yes, sir.
We have many queries and many comments regarding ma'am's presentation. Please read out the comments. So we'll be. Yeah.
Okay, one from Nimisha Sandillo. Ma'am, mostly we see that hijras have motherly nature, but during several train journey, I had noticed that they treat males with so much of frustration as if they have bundle of complaints with males. Can we consider this kind of different treatment for male as their voice against patriarchy, which can be considered responsible for the marginalization of third gender? So, ma'am.
Yes. The question is from?
Question is from Nimisha Sandilla. Nimisha Sandilla.
Okay. Hello, Nimisha. Nimisha was my student back at Dibrugarh. It is good to hear you, at least in words, right? And you will find that the hijras might have a sort of, reservation with regard to men, primarily because, you know, they have now been thrown into sex work as a source of their livelihood. And for this particular sex work, their livelihood, they usually dress themselves and perform like women. And moreover, they do not have any other, choice of performance. And in the course of this kind of sex work, it can be that very frequently, their rights are violated, they are underpaid, and they are also forced into, unprotected sex. So it can be that they tend to develop a sort of hatred or a sort of, a sort of apathy for men, right? This is just an assumption. And to actually know, we will definitely have to take, interviews or focus group discussions and carry out our research, right? And as she very rightly says, we find them in the railway platforms because that is where their livelihood is. Because they have taken on to begging, they wake up early in the morning and they commute from one part of the city or one part of the state to the other part through the railway network. And therefore, even in the state of Assam, you will find their deras, the settlements where they live is called deras, and you will find them along the railway route. And in the northeast, you will find their population is more in the state of Assam, because Assam has a well-laid railway communication network with the rest of India. But it is not that the societies in Northeast India do not have the third gender. The third gender also exists in our part of the world, and you will find their population is more in the rural areas compared to the urban areas.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's really very nice to listen to you.
There is one
Thank
question.
you.
Welcome.
One more question, ma'am.
Yes.
In context of human rights, even human rights education, we find that the third gender, they are not getting the appropriate facilities. What facilities should be provided from the society in case of education, equality, or others, political, economical, socio-cultural. So that means they are backwarded. So revive their, or to come forward, what measures should be taken to redress the inequalities or discrimination regarding the third genders?
Many of the measures are being taken in India. And I've already told you that with the kind of international human rights legislations for the transgender people that have come about, especially if you refer to the Yogyakarta principles, after that, you will find that was in 2006, right? And recently there has been also another 10 plus Yogyakarta principles that has been added to it. And ever since 2006 in India, you will find quite a number of measures are being taken up for the welfare, for the education of the third gender people by the different state governments and also at the central level. And in this case, I think you can refer to states like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Delhi, where, quite a number of measures under the social welfare departments or the social justice departments have been initiated. And there have been also judgments by the Supreme Court, especially the judgment of 2014. Ever since, seats have been reserved for the transgender people in the educational institutions. And there are also reservations for jobs in the different sectors, especially with regard to public employment. Then again, in certain states, welfare boards have been created. And in the state of Assam recently, that is in 2019, there has been a draft policy, and we now have a welfare board, which is coming up with a slew of policy measures. Moreover, there are states, especially the southern states, are far progressive in this matter, and they have been able to include them through different measures, and they are also giving them land and homes to settle down. So quite a number of measures are there. There is also a state government, I am forgetting a bit the name of the state government, which gives, I think it is Delhi, which gives the elderly amongst the third gender pension. Okay, so in this way, they are coming within the ambit of the policies of the state, especially the welfare schemes. And as a society also, we need to bring about a change in our mindset so that they can live a dignified life. And in this aspect, I think the mass media has a huge role to play. They should not be projected as, people who are very funny, right? To be laughed at. They are very much like us. We need to ensure that we are able to create an awareness, and a sensitization program is definitely necessary amongst the larger masses of people, so that they are able to live with dignity and respect like you and I in the society. But at the same time, there are also many lessons to learn from the third gender and their kind of culture. Because in their culture, there is no distinction on the basis of caste, right? Which you find in our kind of cultures. There is so much hierarchy with regard to caste. There is so much do's and don'ts, whom you can marry, whom you cannot, with whom you can dine with, from where you can collect water, where you need to reside, and so on, right? But in their kind of culture, you do not have these caste hierarchies. And it is through this kind of cultural community that they have been created. In a way, you can say that they have created a model of breaking down the caste hierarchy. And also they do not have, even though they have their own religions, they live together in their deras, you know. Somebody might be a Muslim, Muhammadan, somebody might be Hindu, right? But they live together in that same settlement.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
The next question is from Mayuri Sharma. Ma'am, I would like to know about the LGBT community in Assam.
Okay.
Mayuri Sharma. Yes.
So thank you, Mayuri, for the question. And that is a very important question. Since you have been referring to the LGBTQ, it is not merely LGBTQ, it has been increasing, right? And it is LGBTQIA. And their numbers are increasing and increasing, okay? And they are the sexual minorities. And what is your sexuality in your private space should not be a matter of concern. But then what has happened here is all throughout, especially after being influenced by British colonialism, we have made, you know, heterosexuality the normal kind of sexuality. And we have put under the carpet and hidden all the other varied forms of sexuality as abnormal and queer, right? But a human society is never like that. We have got varied and multiple forms of sexualities and orientations. And therefore, these people also have their, you know, human rights, and they should also be entitled to their right to sexuality. And, you know, organizations are being formed by LGBTQI in different parts of India. And even in Assam, there is an organization known as Hukia, right? Which actually includes the LGBTQIA plus of Assam. And there is another organization which is much newer. It is called Enazori, right? So if you are interested, you can look upon these organizations and their activities. And during the COVID pandemic, many of these organizations, like the Center for Ethnic Studies, has taken up to the online platform. Today, many of these activisms are not merely offline, they are also online, right? And that makes easier for us to understand their issues, their mobilizations, their networks, their alliances, their strategies. I hope I satisfy you, Mayuri.
Ma'am, next question from Plavan Priya. Madam, whether the term is the biological construct or social construct?
Sorry for interruption. Sorry for interruption. Bonali Sutia, ma'am, please switch off your mic. Bonali Sutia, ma'am, please switch off. You are asked to switch off your mic. Bonali Sutia, ma'am. Librarian of Jangrabung College, please switch off your mic. Bornalis Priya ma'am, please switch up your mic. Otherwise, you will be removed from the group. Yeah, thank you. Ma'am, please, you can continue. Sorry, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Dipen. You know, the term Hijra is both biological as well as a social construct. It is biological because many of them within the community have been born that way as intersex, or the other term, as you know, is hermaphroditism. And that is who are neither, you know, male nor female. They are also socially constructed through the practice of castration, which they also refer to as a ritual called nirvana, right? And then they are also socially constructed because when they start belonging to this particular community, there are many rules, regulations, and there is a certain hierarchy. There are do's and don'ts. There are practices within it that a member of the community has to subscribe to, and they are socialized into it. And therefore they have, you know, the gurus, that is the teacher, the chela, that is the disciple, right? So I will say that it is a combination of both, you know, biological construct as well as a sociological construct. But, you know, the problem is that for the intersex people who are neither male nor female, you know, they do not have the third option, the third gender identity option in the society, because the society gives them just two, that is men and women. And therefore, for their own livelihood concerns, and also maybe because of their, you know, physiology, chromosomes and hormones, you will find that many of them exhibit feminine traits. And many of them, you know, dress up like women, make up their faces like women. They learn the gestures of women, and many of that gesture also comes to them naturally. And they know that in a patriarchal society, it is only through sex work that they can earn a living, right? Because they are school dropouts, large majority of them are illiterates, many of them are from very poor backgrounds. Then you will also find, you know, biological men. You know, there might be some cases where they might be kidnapped and then emasculated. There are also cases where biological men without emasculation live within these communities for their own livelihood, right? So even when you consider the developmental model in India, right, that model also needs to be made more inclusive. So whatever be my body, right, the external appearance or the physio or the chromosomes and hormones within me should not matter my, you know, economic development and aspiration. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. There is no question as such in chat box. So if anyone want to ask ma'am, then is there anyone?
Zoyasir, I think we should conclude here.
Yeah.
All about 30. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable speech and time. So here I announce the end of this session, and the participants are requested to continue with the third session. Thank you, ma'am, again. Thank you, participants.
So thank you, ma'am,
for
giving us.
And thank you, Dr. Dipen Das.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. So I will leave, and I thank you to all the participants, okay? Because without the participants, you can never have a workshop. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you,
ma'am.
Bye-bye. So now I'm going to record your verbal attendance. Please give your presence in the this session. I will read out your roll number. Roll number means serial number and name of the participant. Please give your attendance. Dr. Niaz Ahmed Ansari, serial number 1. Dr. Niaz Ahmed Ansari. Dr. Pranjit Soikia.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm here.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Ritumoni Halo, serial number 3.
Yes, I am present here. Good afternoon.
Serial number 4, Meghali Bhattacharya.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Serial number 5, Jintumoni Somua.
Yes, present, sir.
Serial number 7, Dr. Prabhali Dole. Prabhali Dole absent. Serial number 8, Dr. Arundhati Lahon.
Serial number 6, Jintumoni Somua, sir.
Yes, present. Serial number 8, Dr. Arundhati Lahon. Absent. Serial number 9, Dr. Ramesh Prasad Koul. Serial number 10, Mary Halam.
Yes, sir. Present, sir.
Serial number 11, Ms. Rupjyoti Das.
Yes, I am present here.
Serial number 12, Anand Chandra Ghosh. Serial number 13, Dr. Soindha Kuswaha. Serial number 14, Jotin Chandra Borua. Serial number 15, Dr. Pallavi Saikia. Serial number 16, Dr. Aravind Shah Barkade. Serial number 17, Raja Dole. Serial number 8, Raja Dole present. Serial number 5, okay, I will repeat. Serial number 18, Mrs. Runu Gogoi.
Yes, present.
Serial number 19, Dr. Mosmi Hazarika. Serial number 19. Serial number 20, Dr. Jamanur Rahman. Serial number 21, Sumila Lama.
Yes, sir, I'm present.
Yeah. Serial number 22, Sandra Prabha Devi Sahu.
Yes, present.
Serial number 23, Dr. Zonali Das.
Yes, I am here.
Serial number 24, Topoti Datta.
Yes, present.
25, Dr. Zonti Purua.
Yes, sir, present. 25, present.
Yeah. 26, Biswajit Bora. Absent. 27, Sima Nath. 28, Sankita Pukon. 29, Dr. Nivedita Saikia.
Yes, sir, present, sir.
Serial number 30, Bornali Sutia.
Present, sir.
31, Lohit Chandra Boisho. 32, Pranjal Hazarika. 33, Dr. Pradeep Burman.
Yes, I am here.
34, Dr. Krishna Raj Chauhan. 35, Upama Gurung.
Yes, sir, present.
36, Rahul Bania. 37, Peter Ki.
Present.
38, Mr. Dipla.
Yes, sir, present. Yes, sir, present. I am 38 present, sir.
39, Hari.
Yes, sir, present, sir. 39 present.
Okay, 38 absent. 40, Orsuna Nath.
Present, sir.
41, Dr. Deepjyoti Bhuya.
Present, sir.
42, Dr. Mainu Goswami. 43, Dr. Medusmita Devi. 44, Rumi Saikia. 45, Dr. Sandana Das.
Yes, sir, present.
46, Agustin Terang. 47, Mondira Bora.
Present here. Yes, present here.
Yeah, 48, Dr. Kakoli Bora. 49,
Present, sir.
50, Dr. Rosebin Shiraz Farjina Akhtar.
Yes, sir, present.
51, Dr. Bijoy Krishna Nath.
Yes, I am present here.
52, Dr. Shivani Phukon.
Yes, I am present.
53, Gunaviram Gogoi. 54, Mayuri Sharma.
Yes, I am present.
55, Kukheswar Bora.
Yes, I am present.
56, Rajesh Pait. 57, Dr. Prem Kanto Bora. 58, 58, Dr. Toliko Gogoi. 59, Konseng Borua. 60, Mrs. Mudra Das. 61, Pranita Kolita.
61, Pranita Kolita present.
Roll number 60.
Present, okay.
61 also present.
62.
Hello.
Dr. Hima.
Roll number 60, Rita Das, present, sir.
Okay. 62. Mr. Nirupam Pukon. Dr. Hima Hazarika Das. 64. Manojit Purakaisto. 65. Dr. Manos Das.
Yes, present.
66. Ziniani Boru. Regularly absent. Bhasko Kakoti. 67.
Present here. Present here.
Okay. 68. Parak Kumar Deka.
Yes, I am present.
69. Rijit Phanikar.
Yes, I am here.
70. Mr. Plavan Huya.
Present, sir.
71. Miss Susila Bareli.
Present, sir.
72. Takasto. 72 absent. 73. Dr. Osini Mase. Regularly absent. 74. Navanita Saikia.
Yes, sir.
Okay. 75. Saigi Talukdar.
Yes, present.
76. Okay. Satung Lawang. 76. 77. Pamsila Bhutia.
Yes, sir.
78. Bhaskar Khanikar.
Present here.
79. Onukuma Tamang.
Yes, sir.
80. Binjoy Nirin.
Yes, sir. Present here.
81. Kanchan Wahenbam.
Present, sir.
82. Nimisha Sandillo.
Present, sir.
83. Kumar Jaswant.
Present, sir.
84. Gorapani Sharma.
Yes, I am present.
Okay. So I will
Sir,
repeat
roll
the
number 7 present.
I will repeat the absentee number. Huh? Serial
Okay.
number 7.
Present, sir.
8. 9.
9
12.
present, sir.
Okay, 9 present. Okay, 12.
Yes, sir.
13. 14.
Present, sir.
14 present. 15. 16. 17. 19. 20.
Sir,
26.
13 present, sir.
13 present.
13
Okay.
present.
20. 26. 26.
56 present, sir.
Jaswant Narayan, please switch off your mic. Rajesh Pait. Jaswant Narayan,
56.
Shima Nath, please switch off your mic. 26. 27. 28. 31. 32. 34. 38. 42. 43. 38 present, sir. Okay, 38
Sir,
present.
Sir, excuse me. 20 present, sir.
20 present, okay. So 42, 43, 44, 46, 53, 56, 57.
56 present, sir.
Yes, present. Present, 57 present.
57 present, okay.
56 present, sir.
56 present, okay. 58, 59, 62, 64, 66.
Sir, 63 present, sir. 63.
63 present, okay. 72,